In question 10, a function f is defined by f of x is equals to 5 minus 2 sine of x for x 0 to pi. In part 1, we have to find the range of pi. Now, to find the range of pi, we can add the values of 5 and 2 and subtract them to get the minimum and maximum value. So first adding 5 and minus 2, you will get 5 minus 2, which is 3. And then subtracting 5 and minus 2, so 5 minus minus 2 will become a 7. So this will be the minimum value of f of x, and this will be the maximum value of f of x. So we can write that f of x will be greater than equals to 3 and less than equals to 7. Another way to find the range of f could have been that we could have assumed values of x as 0, pi upon 4, pi upon 2, pi and 2 pi upon 3, and then found out the maximum minimum values. And from that, we would have observed that the maximum and minimum values would have been 7 and 3. Now in part 2, we have to sketch the graph of f of x. Now to sketch the graph, we can first draw the x and the y axis. So first drawing the x and the y axis. Now as we know that the maximum and minimum points are 3 till 7, so we can make divisions up till 7. So this is 2, this will be 4, 6, and we can label this as 8. And as the range is from 0 to pi, so we can make divisions. So let's say this will be pi upon 2. This will be pi up here. So now to make the graph of f of x, we know that the function f of x is 5 minus 2 sine of 5 minus 2 sine of 2x. Now to sketch the graph, we can assume values of x. So initially taking x equals to 0, the value of the function f of x will be, so sine of 0 is 0, so that will be equals to 5. So we can plot the first point at 0 and 5. Taking the value of x now as pi upon 2. So the value when we substitute in in the function 5 minus 2 sine of x, so the value of f of x will be, so that will become 5 minus 2 as sine of pi is, sine pi is, so this will become 2 into pi upon 2, and sine of pi will be equals to 0. So that will be sine of pi upon 2 will be also equals to 5. So this will be 5 up here, and taking the value in between, which is x equals to pi upon 4. So we can find a value at pi upon 4 as well. So when we substitute x equals to pi upon 4, so pi upon 4 multiplied by 2 will become pi upon 2, and sine of pi upon 2 or sine 90 is 1. So 5 minus 2 will be equals to 3. 5 minus 2 will be 3. So at pi upon 4, the value will be 3. So we can first join these 3 points to make the first part of the graph. And now taking the values, taking sine of pi, x value as pi, so taking x is equals to pi, the f of x will be equals to, so sine pi will be equals to sine of 2 pi is 0, so that will be equals to 5. And then taking a value between pi upon 2 and pi, so that will be 2 pi upon 3. Taking 2 pi upon 3, f of x will be equals to 7. So at 2 pi upon 3, this value will be at 7. So we'll draw a point at 7. And at pi, the value is 5. So joining these points to continue the sine graph, the graph will be made like this. So this will be the sketch of the function f of x. Now in part 4, it says that the function g is defined by g of x is 5 minus 2 sine 2x for 0 to k, where k is a constant. In part 4, it is saying state the largest value of k for which g has an inverse. Now, as g is, so we know that g of x is equals to 5 minus 2 sine of 2x for x greater than equals to 0 and less than equals to k. Now, for the function g to have an inverse, it must be a one-to-one function. So as x is starting from 0, the maximum value till where the function is 1-to-1 is pi upon 4. So we can say that the value of k will be equals to pi upon 4. In part 5, it says for this value of k, find an expression for g inverse. Now we already have g of x as 5 minus 2 sine of 2x. To find the inverse function, we can first write y equals to 5 minus 2 sine of 2x. Exchanging the values of x and y, this will be x equals to 5 minus 2 sine of 2y. Now making y the subject, we'll take 2 sine 2y on the left hand side. and taking x on the right hand side, this will become 5 minus x. Dividing it by 2, that will become 5 minus x upon 2. Now taking sine inverse, so that will be 2y will be equals to sine inverse of 5 minus x upon 2. And then finally, to find the value of y, we'll divide the whole function by 2. So that will become sine inverse of 5 minus x upon 2 divided by 2. So that will be sine inverse will be 5 minus x upon 2. And then, so the 2 had already divided. So this will be, so there will be a slight correction over here. This will become sine inverse of x was, so 2y was equals to sine inverse of 5 minus x upon 2. So that is 5 minus x upon 2, and y will be equals to sine inverse of 5 minus x upon 2, and this will divide by 2 up here. So finally, we can write that g inverse of x will be equals to 1 upon 2 into sine inverse of 5 minus x upon 2.